It happened in the middle of a checkout line, just when you least expect a human moment to unfold. When your head's down, you're juggling groceries and your last nerve, and someone behind you forgets what empathy even looks like. That's when everything changed. One woman, standing quietly with her young son, became the target of something cruel and unnecessary: laughter. Not the good kind, not the kind that brings people together, but the sharp, smug kind that slices through your dignity like a knife. And as that stranger smirked and pointed at her worn-out sneakers, the off-brand cereal, and the calculator in her hand, something unimaginable happened. She reached into her worn leather wallet to pull out a coupon, and out slipped a badge. In that moment, everything about her shifted. And that stranger's face? You won't believe what it looked like when he realized who she really was. Hey, before we dive into this jaw-dropping real-life story, let me say this. If you've ever been judged for the way you look, how much money you make, or how you try to provide for your family, then this story is for you. Because sometimes, the people the world tries to overlook, the single mom in the checkout line, the exhausted parent stretching pennies, the quiet soul just trying to make it to Friday, they carry more strength and more secrets than anyone could ever imagine. This story isn't just about a rude stranger, or even about groceries. It's about power, identity, and what happens when people forget that every person they meet might be fighting a battle they can't see. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll get the answer to why that badge changed everything. Stick with me. Now, I know there are a million videos out there vying for your time, but this one might just change the way you look at the world. So lean in, because the truth in this story doesn't just hit hard, it hits home. We're not just telling a story here. We're walking step by step through a moment that says everything about who we are, how we treat each other, and what dignity really looks like. This isn't fiction. It's real life, raw and unfiltered, just the way it happened. The grocery store that day wasn't in some glamorous part of town. It was just your average suburban supermarket in the US, fluorescent lights, squeaky carts, kids whining for candy, and moms doing mental math between rice and rent. The woman we're talking about, her name is Rachel, was a single mom doing her best. You know the type: ponytail pulled back tight, faded hoodie, jeans that have seen too many washes, and that look in her eye like she's got 1,000 things on her mind and barely a moment to spare. Her cart wasn't overflowing, but everything in it had purpose. A gallon of milk, some pasta, a few canned vegetables, baby wipes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was survival. Her son, about 7 years old, stood beside her, quiet, respectful, a little too grown up for his age. You could tell he knew this wasn't just any errand. He knew how tight things were. You could feel it, that quiet tension that comes when every item in the cart matters. Every dollar counts. And even though Rachel tried to stay focused, you could see it in her body language. The worry, the pressure, the weight of doing it all on her own. And then, that laugh. Loud, arrogant, careless. It came from behind her, from a man in a designer coat and crisp jeans, holding nothing but a single bottle of sparkling water and some overpriced protein bars. He laughed like she was part of a joke only he found funny. Really? Coupons and off-brand cereal? Someone's living the high life. He sneered loud enough for her and the people in line to hear. He didn't whisper it. He wanted her to feel it. He wanted her to shrink. But Rachel didn't flinch. She didn't turn around or cause a scene. She simply reached into her wallet, calm as ever, to find her store coupon. That's when it happened. The badge, real, government-issued, slid out and hit the floor beside her worn-out sneakers. Everyone saw it, and in that single moment, the laughter behind her dried up like rain in a desert. The man's smirk twisted into something else entirely. Fear? Guilt? Shame? Maybe all three. And what came next? Well, that's where things really get interesting. Now, let's pause here just for a moment, because this is where the real story begins. And if you think this is just about a badge or some quick karma in a checkout line, think again. What's behind that badge? What does Rachel really do for a living? And what about her past? The secrets she's kept, the sacrifices she's made, and the reason why she's the last person you ever want to underestimate. We're about to peel back the layers. We're going to reveal what that badge really means, not just in terms of her job, but in terms of her fight, her story, her truth. And we'll show you exactly how that one moment in a grocery line became a turning point not just for her, but for everyone watching. Stick with me, because this isn't just a viral moment caught in public. It's a story about dignity, justice, and resilience, the kind of story that makes you think twice the next time you see someone quietly struggling. You'll meet the man who laughed, and you'll learn what happened when he found out exactly who Rachel was. And no, she wasn't a cop. She wasn't a detective. What she was, and what she still is, might surprise you even more. But I want to make something clear before we continue. This isn't a story that ends with a simple apology or a pat on the back. What happens after that badge is revealed takes us into a world few people know about, a world where heroes don't wear capes. They carry trauma. They balance motherhood and national duty. They take insults in silence, but they never forget. And when the time is right, they show the world exactly who they are. So if you've ever doubted yourself, ever been belittled by someone who thought they had more money, more power, more worth, this story is your reminder. Your value isn't measured by the brand of cereal in your cart. And for Rachel, it was about to become very clear, very fast, that she was more powerful than anyone could have imagined, including the man who laughed. Now, what did that badge really say? What secrets had Rachel kept hidden, even from her neighbors and closest friends? And how did one awkward, cruel moment at a supermarket checkout spark a chain of events that would change multiple lives forever? You'll find out. But first, let me take you back to where it all began. Rachel hadn't always shopped at that grocery store. In fact, just a year earlier, she wouldn't have even stepped foot in a neighborhood like that, with its underfunded schools, rising crime rates, and housing developments that looked more like forgotten blueprints than finished homes. But life had a way of reshuffling everything you thought was solid. After a sudden transfer from her previous post in Denver, Rachel relocated with her son to the small but bustling town of Crestview, a place most people only knew because of the highway signs or the massive military installation that loomed several miles out. Her work, government-issued badge, and all came with a level of secrecy. She didn't wear a uniform. She wasn't posted at a front desk or driving a squad car. She worked in federal investigations, deep-level clearance, intelligence training, and undercover operations that not even her family fully understood. When people asked, she told them she was in federal security, which sounded just vague enough to end the conversation. But the truth was, Rachel had been part of something much bigger. Something that had recently gone sideways. The kind of case that doesn't make headlines until it's too late. That last mission before her transfer, it had involved a trafficking ring, high-level data leaks, and a suspected mole inside her own agency. She wasn't supposed to know the mole's name. She wasn't even supposed to be close to finding it. But she had gotten too close. And that's when things started to unravel. Her sudden reassignment to Crestview had been framed as a promotion, an opportunity to gain field perspective in a quieter area, but she knew what it really was, a strategic relocation. Someone up the chain had wanted her off the map, far away from what she had discovered. So now, instead of surveillance vans and encrypted briefings, Rachel was spending her days blending in, shopping with coupons, and pretending like her world hadn't just shifted under her feet. She wasn't hiding. Not exactly. But she was watching, waiting, collecting pieces of a puzzle she wasn't supposed to finish. The town itself was quiet on the surface, but full of shadows. The people were friendly in that overly polite way that made you wonder what they were trying to cover up. There was the overly helpful grocery clerk who always seemed too curious about where she was from. The mailman who lingered just a second too long at her door. The elderly neighbor across the street who spent hours pretending to water her garden while constantly glancing toward Rachel's driveway. None of them did anything suspicious enough to confront, but something about the way they watched her just didn't sit right. It was like they knew something she didn't. Or worse, they were waiting for her to find out. Then there was her landlord, a man named Charles Decker, a retired military contractor with a spotless public record and a house just a few blocks away. He was courteous, always on time with repairs, and strangely generous when it came to letting her slide a few days late on rent. Most people would have taken that as kindness. Rachel, however, trusted patterns and Deckers didn't make sense. He'd once casually mentioned a defense contract he worked on, one that happened to be connected to the exact task force Rachel had been assigned to 6 months prior. That alone wouldn't raise alarms, but when she asked for more details, he suddenly couldn't remember names, locations, or even the name of the agency that paid him. That was the first red flag. The second came when she found an unmarked envelope tucked beneath her windshield wiper late one night after work. Inside, a single photo of her son walking to school, along with a note that simply read, "Stop digging." It was that moment, standing in her driveway, shaking under the weight of a message that was equal parts threat and warning, that Rachel realized someone in Crestview knew who she was and what she had been working on. It wasn't paranoia. It was precision. Someone had eyes on her, and they wanted her scared. That's when the idea of keeping a low profile turned into something much more delicate. She stopped using her government-issued phone. She stopped going to the same coffee shop every morning. She taught her son how to recognize a tail without making it obvious. And she started keeping a burner phone in her sock drawer, because in her line of work, if someone wants to scare you, they're already halfway to silencing you. And still, even with everything she'd experienced, that man's laughter in the grocery store hit differently. It wasn't just about the insult or the humiliation. It was about the timing, because Rachel had noticed something strange about him the second she entered the store. He wasn't looking at the groceries. He wasn't checking prices or grabbing items off the shelves. He was walking aisle by aisle, pretending to shop, but his eyes were scanning faces. He wore sunglasses indoors and kept a Bluetooth earpiece in just one ear, even though he never once answered a call. And when she walked past him near the frozen food section, she felt it, the same tingle on the back of her neck that told her she was being watched. She'd felt it before on missions overseas, in dark alleys in foreign cities, in safe houses where safe was only a suggestion. That instinct never left her, and it flared to life the moment he laughed. Was it coincidence that he ended up behind her in the checkout line? Possibly. But in her world, coincidence was just another word for sloppy surveillance. The badge falling out hadn't been part of the plan. She'd never wanted to expose herself like that. But maybe, deep down, part of her wanted him to see it. Wanted him to know she wasn't some helpless, struggling mom he could intimidate. And when their eyes met after that badge hit the floor, there was something else there, recognition. Just for a second. Not shock, not confusion, but something closer to awareness. Like he'd been waiting for confirmation. Like he knew her face, but needed the badge to be sure. And now the questions were piling up faster than she could organize them. Was he sent by whoever had left that note? Was he testing her, trying to provoke a reaction? Or was he just another planted observer, part of the elaborate web closing in around her? It didn't help that 2 days later, when she went back to that same grocery store, he was gone. No record of his transaction. No surveillance footage kept. The cashier claimed she'd never seen him before. The store manager said their systems auto-delete video files every 48 hours. It was as if he'd never been there. And Rachel? She was left holding a crumpled grocery receipt, her son's tiny hand in hers, and a sick feeling in her stomach that she wasn't just being watched anymore, she was being studied. That's the thing about Rachel's world. It's never what it seems. The villains aren't always the loudest. The threats aren't always the most obvious. And the truth? The truth is buried beneath layers of lies, so convincing that even she had started to doubt her instincts. But now, something was shifting. The laugh in the grocery store wasn't just mockery, it was a trigger. And whatever it had set in motion, she knew one thing for sure. Someone had decided it was time to make a move. Whether it was Charles Decker, the ever-curious neighbor, or the stranger in the designer coat, someone was pulling strings. And if Rachel wasn't careful, one of those strings might snap. But she wasn't going to wait for another warning. She wasn't going to let fear run the show. Because Rachel hadn't survived this long in the federal world by backing down. And she certainly wasn't going to start now, not with her son's safety hanging in the balance. What she didn't know, what she couldn't yet see, was that the real threat wasn't watching her from across the street or standing behind her in a checkout line. The real threat was already closer than she imagined, and it was about to make its move. It started with the missing flash drive. Rachel had kept it in a safe, an actual steel, combination lock safe bolted to the floor of her bedroom closet, hidden beneath layers of storage boxes and winter coats no one touched in spring. That drive wasn't supposed to exist. It contained fragments of audio pulled from a scrambled comm line during her final case back in Denver, distorted voices, corrupted timestamps, and, buried deep within the noise, a partial name. She hadn't been able to decipher the full thing, but what she had decoded pointed toward someone inside the agency. Someone with direct access to classified case files and clearance high enough to bury entire operations. That flash drive had been her insurance. It was the only thing tying her suspicions to something concrete. And now it was gone. The break-in showed no signs of forced entry. Nothing else was touched. No drawers ransacked. No prints left behind. The front door lock wasn't picked. The windows were still locked from the inside, and the alarm system hadn't triggered. But the safe? Its combination had been reset. Someone had known the exact code. That was the most terrifying part. It meant this wasn't a random threat. Whoever had taken it didn't need to find the safe. They knew it was there. They knew what was inside. And they knew exactly how to disappear without a trace. Rachel didn't call the police. What would she say? That a piece of unauthorized federal surveillance evidence had gone missing from her closet? That someone had bypassed an agency-grade security system without a single alert? She was alone in this now. Even her contact at HQ, the only person she still trusted, had gone dark. No return calls. No messages. Just a chilling silence that seemed to confirm her worst fear. This went deeper than she ever imagined. The next day, while driving her son to school, she noticed a black SUV 2 cars behind her at every intersection. It didn't have government plates, but she recognized the make and model, standard issue for private military contractors and low-visibility ops. She turned off her usual route and took a longer loop through a construction zone, just to test the tail. Sure enough, the SUV followed. Not aggressively. Not close enough to trigger panic. Just persistently. She memorized the license plate. Then, 3 hours later, when she tried to run the number through a private system she had access to, it came back as unregistered. Not missing. Not stolen. Just non-existent. Like someone had ghosted the vehicle's identity before it ever hit the road. That's when she got the text. It came from an anonymous number, no contact name, no history. Just a single sentence. You're not the only one being watched. It could have meant anything. A warning. A threat. A trap. But the message wasn't what froze her in place. It was the image that followed. A photo of her, taken from across the street that same morning, standing on her porch with her keys in hand and her son by her side. The angle was high, distant. It was taken from above, maybe a rooftop, maybe a drone. But what truly unsettled her wasn't how close it had been, it was the fact that her son was cropped out of the frame. Deliberately. As if whoever took it knew not to threaten him directly. As if they were trying to tell her this wasn't about intimidation. This was personal. Just when she thought she had a lead, it crumbled. She finally reached out to a retired analyst she used to work with, Tess Manning, one of the most brilliant minds in federal tech, and someone Rachel had mentored years earlier. Tess was cagey at first, hesitant to say anything over the phone, but agreed to meet the next day in a nearby town to talk face-to-face. She promised she had information, something Rachel needed to see. But Tess never showed. Instead, Rachel arrived at the diner they agreed on, waited 20 minutes, then received a voicemail. The message was barely 6 seconds long. Tess's voice rushed, strained. I can't, they know I talked. Don't, then static. Rachel tried calling back. Straight to voicemail. The next day, Tess's number was disconnected. Her apartment? Emptied. Mail piled up, plants dead. It was like she had vanished overnight. Not fled. Erased. Even more disturbing, Rachel started noticing inconsistencies in her own house. Nothing blatant. Just subtle shifts. Keys not where she left them. A mug drying in the rack that she hadn't used. Her laptop's webcam light flickering for a second when it shouldn't have. Once, her son mentioned that the mail lady asked if his mom still worked with spies. But there was no female postal worker on their route. And that's when Rachel remembered something else, something buried in her memory from years ago. A mission overseas. A deep cover infiltration in Eastern Europe. She'd been part of a joint operation to expose a double agent feeding American intel to an unidentified third party. The mission had been scrapped midway. The agent had vanished. The files were sealed. But there was one name that kept surfacing back then, whispered in encrypted chatter and intercepted messages. Lazarus. A ghost code name, used by someone never officially identified. Back then, it had been labeled misinformation, just a code used to distract intelligence agencies. But now, that same name had shown up in a decrypted file she'd glanced at on the stolen flash drive, right before it was taken. Could Lazarus be the one pulling strings here? Could it be Decker? Or someone even higher up, someone still embedded deep within the agency? What if the betrayal wasn't new, but something that had started years ago and was only now circling back? Rachel had once believed her biggest threat came from the criminals she tracked. But now, she wasn't sure if the real danger came from the outside, or from within the very walls of the institution she'd sworn to protect. And just when she thought she was finally starting to put the pieces together, a letter arrived in her mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was taken 15 years ago, long before her son was born. She was in it, smiling, arms around two people she hadn't spoken to since the night of the failed mission. One of them was supposed to be dead. And on the back of the photo, in ink that looked freshly smudged, someone had written, "You left us. Now we're coming back." The photograph didn't just rattle Rachel, it haunted her. It cracked open a vault in her mind that she had spent years sealing shut. The two people standing beside her in that image were agents she had served with under deep cover, part of a covert trio assigned to dismantle a foreign cyberespionage ring. Their operation had gone horribly wrong. One of them, Marcus Holloway, had been presumed dead in a building fire during an ambush. The other, Elena Quaid, had vanished after that mission, rumored to have defected or gone rogue. Rachel had testified to the agency that she had no knowledge of Elena's whereabouts. That was true, mostly. But now, seeing them again, alive, not only in that old photo but implied by the chilling message on its back, raised questions she never dared entertain. Why resurface now? Who had kept the photo all these years? And why was it delivered not to threaten, but to remind? As Rachel studied the photo under lamplight, searching for any hidden message in the paper texture or ink patterns, her phone buzzed with a call she hadn't expected. It was her sister, Vanessa. The two of them rarely spoke, not because of any falling out, but because Rachel had always kept her family distanced from the risks of her work. Vanessa sounded shaken. She asked a question Rachel hadn't anticipated. "Did you send someone by the bookstore today? A man said he was a friend of yours. Gave me your old agency ID." Rachel's blood ran cold. She hadn't used that ID in years. It had been voided and destroyed during her transition out of field duty. And she hadn't told anyone, not even Vanessa, about where she used to work or who she used to be. Vanessa described the man.
Tall.
Military posture. Sunglasses indoors. He didn't buy a book. He just walked around the shelves slowly, like he was scanning the place. Then, before he left, he slid an envelope onto the counter. Vanessa hadn't opened it. She was too unnerved. Rachel told her to take a photo of it front and back, but not to open it until she got there. They hung up, and Rachel grabbed her bag, heart pounding, thoughts spinning. The fear wasn't just that someone was targeting her now. It was spreading, reaching those she'd tried to protect by staying silent. When she got to the bookstore, the envelope was still there, untouched. It had no markings on the outside, just her name typed in small block letters. Rachel carefully opened it, half expecting another photograph. But this time it was a printed document, a scan of a redacted field report, the kind she'd seen 100 times over. But this one was different. It detailed an incident from a military black site in Eastern Europe, dated a year after Marcus's supposed death. It listed 2 agents present during a communications shutdown caused by a suspected infiltration. One was named as EQ, the other was simply listed as Asset 7. There was no mention of Marcus, but the location, the time, the agents involved, all lined up with what should have been the last known trace of him. Except Rachel remembered the mission report she signed after the fire. According to official records, no one made it out alive. That report, too, had her signature. She suddenly wondered if she'd been played from the beginning. Back at home, she locked the envelope and document away and checked the cameras. That's when she saw it. A new notification, footage from her backyard sensor. At 3:13 a.m. the previous night, someone had been standing just beyond the range of the porch light, facing the house. The figure didn't move, didn't try to break in. They just stood there for exactly 8 minutes. Then they turned and walked away. When she zoomed in, something caught her eye. The person wore a ring. It flashed silver in the moonlight and bore a crest she knew too well, the sigil of an elite internal surveillance unit from within the agency, one Rachel had once been part of before it was dismantled due to ethical breaches. It had been disbanded, purged from the system. Members scattered, some quietly dismissed, others reassigned. But someone still wore the symbol. That meant someone had kept it alive in the shadows. As Rachel processed this, her son, Eli, called from the hallway, holding an envelope he found slipped under the front door. She rushed over, snatching it from his hands. This one was heavier. Inside was a flash drive and a note in cursive handwriting. "You missed something." Her laptop was air-gapped and secure, so she plugged it in there. The files it contained were blurry surveillance videos, outdoor shots mostly, from various cities. But the audio was cleaner. Each video had the same voiceover. A woman's voice, listing coordinates, names, and something that sounded like mission codes. Then, at the end of the last file, a glitch, a stutter in the recording, and then a voice she recognized. Her own. Speaking into a comms mic. Target identified. Elena Quaid is compromised. Rachel had no memory of that recording. She'd never made that statement. At least not willingly. The tone was hers, the cadence too. But the words didn't match anything she recalled saying. Could her voice have been synthesized? Was someone rewriting history using her identity? And, if so, to what end? The layers of the conspiracy were tightening around her like a noose. Nothing could be trusted. Not memory, not records, not even her own past. The people she'd mourned were alive. The allies she'd once confided in were silent or gone. The documents she'd signed, the reports she'd filed, were they all part of a larger game? And now, someone had dragged her family into the vortex. Just as she was about to shut everything down for the night, her phone vibrated again. This time, a message from an unknown sender. It read, "The bookstore was a test. You failed." That was followed by a GPS link that pointed not to her house or her sister's, but to the elementary school where her son had music lessons every Thursday afternoon. Rachel didn't wait. She grabbed her keys, locked the drive back in the safe, and left the house, unsure of what she would find, but very certain of one thing. The people behind this weren't trying to hide anymore. They were letting her know they were always 2 steps ahead. And as she drove through the rain-slicked streets toward the school, a question haunted her with relentless force. What if this had never been about her at all? The rain had picked up, transforming the quiet city streets into glassy rivers reflecting every neon sign and street lamp in a distorted glow. Rachel's fingers clenched the steering wheel tighter as her tires cut through the puddles, her mind replaying every detail of the flash drive, the mysterious message, and the unmistakable voice that she had no memory of speaking. She could feel the cold knot of dread tightening in her chest, not from fear of what she might find at the school, but from the growing certainty that she was being played. This wasn't just a threat, it was a performance, and she was being cast in the lead role of a narrative she didn't write. When she finally turned into the small lot outside the school's back entrance, everything looked eerily normal. Too normal. The glow from the hallway lights spilled faintly through the frosted windows, but the doors were locked, and there were no signs of anyone inside. Then she saw it, a black SUV idling across the street, headlights off, engine faintly rumbling beneath the sound of the rain. It hadn't been there when she passed this corner earlier. She hadn't heard it pull in. And yet, it was parked with surgical precision, as if it had been waiting for her. Rachel didn't exit the car right away. She killed the engine and let the silence settle. Her heart pounded as she slowly pulled out her phone and turned on the camera, zooming in on the windshield of the SUV. The glare made it hard to see through the tinted glass, but in a brief flicker of lightning, she caught a silhouette, a person sitting in the driver's seat, motionless, watching, waiting. Then, as if cued by that exact moment, the SUV pulled out with a soft squeal and turned the corner, disappearing into the storm without ever turning on its lights. That's when Rachel's phone buzzed again. No name, no number, just one line of text. You brought this on yourself. Her hands were shaking now, but not just from fear. There was rage boiling beneath it. Not the kind born from vengeance, but from violation. Someone was in control of her life, manipulating her every move, dragging her through memories, people, and places she thought she'd buried. She tried calling Vanessa, but the line went straight to voicemail. Then she called again. Still no answer. A third time, this time letting it ring until it cut off. That wasn't normal. Vanessa was always glued to her phone, even when she was working the bookstore late. Rachel dropped her phone onto the passenger seat and turned the car around. She didn't even hesitate. Her next stop was her sister's place. The rain hadn't let up, and traffic was sparse, but Rachel's instinct screamed at her that she wasn't alone on the road. Every turn, every stoplight, she felt eyes on her. She caught glimpses of shadows in rearview mirrors, headlights that disappeared the moment she sped up or slowed down. When she pulled up to Vanessa's building, the unease intensified. Her sister's car was still parked where it always was, but the windows to her apartment were completely dark. No porch light. No glow from inside. Rachel knocked on the door, then banged. She rang the bell. Nothing. She pulled out her emergency key and slipped it into the lock. The door swung open, and what she found made her stomach lurch. The apartment was trashed. Not ransacked, not burglarized, but clinically dismantled. The shelves were stripped bare, books pulled apart, furniture flipped but not broken. It was a search, one done by professionals. Rachel rushed through the rooms, calling out Vanessa's name. No answer. Her sister's phone was on the kitchen counter, screen cracked, next to an empty coffee mug. But what really got her was the smell. Something sharp, metallic, lingering just beneath the surface. And then, in the living room, taped to the inside of the television screen, was a note scribbled in red marker. She knew too much. So do you. Rachel staggered back, her hands trembling. She felt like the walls were closing in, like the air was thinning by the second. How had they gotten to Vanessa? When? Why? And more terrifyingly, why hadn't they taken Rachel when they had the chance? Was this all about scaring her into submission? Or worse, forcing her to act in a way they could predict? She backed out of the apartment, locking the door behind her even though she knew it was useless. The apartment wasn't just compromised. It was a message. She couldn't go back home. Not now. Not with Eli there. So she called a trusted neighbor and gave vague instructions to keep Eli inside and safe for the night, promising she'd explain everything soon. The neighbor, who had known Rachel for years and trusted her without question, agreed. Rachel hung up and got back in her car. Her next stop wasn't to chase answers. It was to protect her son. But as she merged onto the highway, her dashboard lights flickered. Then her GPS, which she hadn't even turned on, suddenly blinked to life. A new route appeared. A destination she hadn't entered. The voice-guided system, distorted and low, spoke. Keep driving. Don't turn around. Rachel's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted to the side mirror. There it was again. The black SUV. Same shape. Same lights. She slammed the accelerator and switched lanes, hoping to lose it. But every turn she made, it matched her. Every highway exit, every roundabout. They weren't just watching her anymore. They were steering her towards something. What terrified her most wasn't the threat of physical harm. It was the psychological warfare. The precision. the knowledge they had of her every move, her family, her past. She had lived undercover for years, dodging foreign agents, dismantling covert operations, and even then, she had never felt this exposed. Whoever was behind this had the kind of access only a government agency or a rogue faction within one could pull off. But the deeper Rachel went, the more it felt personal. Like someone from her past wasn't just watching, they were orchestrating. And the line between memory and manipulation was starting to blur. Then her phone rang again. This time a video call. She answered instinctively. The screen was black for a moment, and then a face appeared, a face she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Marcus Holloway. Older, paler, and very much alive. He looked directly into the camera, his expression flat. You need to stop, Rachel. Before they erase everything you love. The screen cut to black before she could speak. Her phone shut off completely. No power. No warning. Just dead silence. And somewhere, miles behind her, or perhaps right next to her in the darkness, someone was pulling all the strings. Rachel didn't speak for nearly a minute after the screen went black. Her mind struggled to process the face that had just appeared in front of her, the man who was supposed to be dead. Marcus Holloway had been a phantom from her past, a shadow buried under years of classified missions and erased field reports. The official story was simple. Marcus had been killed in an off-the-books operation overseas. No body recovered, no press, just a folded flag handed to a grieving family that didn't know half the truth. She'd mourned him, hated him, buried the trauma, and kept it there. And now here he was, alive, warning her like a ghost come back to finish what he started. But what disturbed her more than his reappearance was the way he'd said it. Before they erase everything you love. It wasn't just a threat. It was a confession. And suddenly, every frame of the last few days rewound in her mind with terrifying clarity. The SUV. The planted flash drive. The voice that mimicked hers with terrifying precision. Vanessa's disappearance. The message on the television. None of it had been random. It wasn't just surveillance. It was a story being fed to her, one breadcrumb at a time. And for the first time since it all began, Rachel had a gnawing suspicion that she wasn't the target. She was the experiment. She pulled off the road into an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town, the glow of flickering lights casting long, twisted shadows across her windshield. Her fingers moved quickly, opening the back panel of her phone and pulling the battery. Then she slid a burner phone from the glove compartment, one she hadn't used in over a year. It was supposed to be dead, untraceable. She dialed a secure line, one only 3 people in her life had ever known. And when it picked up, the voice on the other end didn't say hello. "I wonder how long it would take you to figure it out," said the calm, unshaken voice of Special Agent Thomas Reddick, her former handler at the agency, the man who had helped orchestrate her extraction after her last mission went sideways, and the one person she still trusted or had trusted. "Marcus is alive," Rachel said flatly, watching the dark road ahead as if the night itself might lunge at her. "He's part of this. He's behind it." There was a pause. Then Reddick laughed, not cruelly, but with the weariness of someone who had expected this conversation and dreaded it. "Rachel, Marcus isn't behind this. He's trying to stop it." The words sank in like lead weights. Rachel froze. "What do you mean?" "You were the target, yes," Reddick said. "But not for what you know. For who you are." He paused again, this time with something like regret in his voice. "You're not being hunted, Rachel. You're being studied." The silence in the car was deafening. Reddick continued. "Do you remember the protocol we used to talk about during debriefs? Project Mirrored Mind? The one we joked about, voice replication, digital hallucinations, memory feedback loops." Rachel felt a chill crawl across her arms. "It was never a theory," he said quietly. "It was in development for years. And you were one of the few agents ever exposed to the full trial, without your knowledge. Marcus found out. That's why they burned him. That's why they tried to burn you." Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. "You let them do this to me?" "No," Reddick replied. "I try to stop them. That's why I left. But it's gone rogue. The project isn't controlled anymore. The tech got out and someone's using it, twisting it, to reconstruct your life. Your memories. Your triggers. You're not chasing a conspiracy, Rachel. You're reliving a simulation that was designed from your own classified files. Her thoughts reeled. Vanessa? Is she real? Was she taken? She's real, Reddick said. But she might not be who you think she is. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. What are you saying? She was never just your sister, he said. She was planted. That single sentence cracked the ground beneath everything Rachel thought she knew. Vanessa had been her rock, the only family she'd ever trusted. They'd grown up together, gone through tragedy together, shared everything. But Reddick's voice was unwavering. The agency embedded her into your life years ago to monitor long-term psychological effects after Project Mirrored Mind was administered. They altered records, paid off witnesses, implanted memories through guided therapy sessions. That's why she was always just a little too perfect, too available. She was your handler. And now that the simulation is spiraling out of control, they took her off the board. Rachel's stomach turned violently, as if every breath she'd taken around her sister had been a lie. But even through the betrayal, something didn't line up. Vanessa had loved Eli like her own. She'd risked her life during that car crash last year. She cried when their mother's ring was found at the shelter. No one could fake that, right? I don't believe you, Rachel said, gripping the steering wheel to keep from shaking. You're lying. You're part of it. I wish I was, Reddick said. Because then I could stop it. Then the line went dead. Rachel stared at the phone in stunned silence. The night outside was still, but the storm now raged inside her. Nothing made sense anymore. What was real? Who could she trust? Was she even making her own decisions, or were they programmed? Every action she'd taken over the last 48 hours might have been predetermined by someone pulling strings, watching her responses like a lab rat in a glass cage. But one thing was certain now. The story wasn't about a stranger laughing at her groceries. It wasn't about a badge or a wallet or a creepy message on a flash drive. It was about a war being waged inside her own mind. And she had no idea whose side she was really on. Rachel didn't remember pulling back onto the road. Her body moved on autopilot, navigating the streets she no longer trusted while her mind reeled from the conversation with Reddick. If what he said was true, then nothing in her life, nothing she had built, trusted, or believed in, was ever truly hers. The idea that Vanessa, the one person who had held her together through childhood trauma, her divorce, the birth of her son, might not only have been part of a long con but assigned to her from the beginning, was too much to fully accept. And yet, so much of it made a terrible kind of sense. The way Vanessa always seemed to know what she needed before she asked. The way she never questioned Rachel's abrupt disappearances or her emotional volatility. The way she had always made excuses for her son's absences, her late-night calls, her strange paranoia. But the thing that twisted Rachel's gut most wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how deeply she had relied on Vanessa's presence just to feel human. She drove for almost an hour with no real destination, until the city lights gave way to rural roads and darkened fields. The storm had broken, leaving the air thick and silent. Rachel finally pulled off near an old diner on the edge of town where she used to meet contacts in the early days. It was closed now, a relic of a life she barely remembered, but the parking lot was empty, and more importantly, it was a place no one had eyes on. She sat in the car for what felt like forever, her mind unraveling with the weight of what came next. She couldn't go home. She couldn't reach Vanessa. Reddick had gone dark. And whoever was orchestrating this had already anticipated her every move. That's when her burner phone buzzed again. A new message. No sender. Just 4 words. You have a choice. A second later, another text came through. This one included a link. Rachel hesitated, but she tapped it. It opened a secure video stream, already in progress. On screen was a room, plain, windowless, with a metal table at its center. Tied to the chair was Vanessa. Her hair was matted, a bruise darkened her temple, and her lip was split. But she was alive, awake, breathing. Rachel leaned forward, heart hammering. Then the voice came, modulated, artificial, cold. You have until midnight. Option 1, walk away, and your son stays safe. You and Eli will be extracted, identities changed, no questions asked. This ends now. Or option 2, keep digging, and we release the real footage. Everything you've done. Everything you've said. You won't just lose your career, you'll lose your child. The screen cut to black before Rachel could process it all. Her hands gripped the phone so hard, she could feel the plastic start to crack. She knew the footage they were threatening to release had to be tied to the manipulated audio files and surveillance they'd been collecting. She didn't know what was real and what was manufactured anymore. And that was exactly the point. They wanted to break her. Box her in. Force her to choose between the truth and her son. Between justice and safety. Between her past and whatever future she still had left. She could feel the panic swelling behind her ribs, threatening to spill out in uncontrollable sobs. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Not while she still had a single card to play. There was one person she hadn't contacted, a man she swore she'd never speak to again, not after the betrayal that nearly got her killed 5 years ago in Istanbul. Nathan Devlin. Former asset, former lover, former everything. He had gone off-grid after a botched mission where Rachel had been forced to choose between his freedom and the success of the op. She'd chosen the op, and Nathan had paid the price. Word was he'd been recruited by a splinter group working under the radar, people who specialized in recovering agents the agency wanted to forget. If anyone knew how to untangle this kind of psychological warfare, it was him. The only problem was she didn't know if he would help her, or hand her over to settle the score. Rachel dialed his encrypted number, one she had kept memorized even when she tried to forget everything about him. It rang 4 times. Then silence. Then, if this is you, you're already in too deep. His voice hadn't changed. Still gravel and ice. She swallowed hard. I need your help. A pause. You're burning. I can smell it from here. Another pause. Then he said something that sent a chill down her spine. They've used me too, Rachel. You're not the only one. That's when it hit her. This went even deeper than a rogue program or a betrayal by a single agency. This was systemic. Global. Something that had outgrown its creators. Project Mirrored Mind hadn't been decommissioned. It had evolved, replicated, repurposed. The people behind it weren't just experimenting on her. They were rewriting the future of intelligence using the minds of those they once considered assets. They were turning operatives into pawns and memories into weapons. Nathan told her to meet him, alone, in a neutral location. He had something she needed to see, proof that the version of her life she believed in had been tampered with far earlier than she realized. But as Rachel turned the ignition and pulled back onto the road, a sudden fear rose in her throat. If Vanessa had been a plant, if Reddick had lied for years, if Nathan had been another victim, then who could she trust? And more terrifying still, was the child she'd raised, protected, and loved more than life itself truly hers? Because the final message that popped up on her burner, just as she merged back onto the highway, changed everything. Eli was part of the program too. Rachel's hands shook as she sped toward the meeting point, her mind racing with the implications of the latest bombshell. Eli, her son, the light of her life, the one person she had protected above all else, wasn't just a bystander in this twisted game. He was part of the program. The one thing she'd never even considered, the one thread she had overlooked in her desperate pursuit of answers, had now tied him to the conspiracy that had swallowed everything she thought was real. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She'd spent her entire life fighting to keep her family safe, to protect the fragile world she had built around her son, and now she was being told that he had been a pawn all along. The tears welled up, but there was no time for them. She had no room for weakness. The clock was ticking, and the truth she sought felt like it was slipping further out of her reach with every passing second. She drove faster, cutting across lanes with no concern for the risks. She was beyond caring about consequences. All she could focus on was the nagging feeling in her gut. Was she walking into a trap? Everything inside her screamed that she couldn't trust anyone, not even Nathan. Especially not Nathan. After everything that had happened between them, there was too much unresolved, too much pain. But she had no choice. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, and unless she found a way to put them together, it was all going to collapse. Eli was part of the program. That single sentence echoed in her head, shaking her to the core. Who could she trust? Was her son even hers? The headlights of a car appeared in the distance, cutting through the darkness as Rachel pulled off onto a dirt road leading to an abandoned warehouse. This was it, the rendezvous point. She'd been here before, years ago, but it had been different then. Cleaner. Safer. Now the air felt thick with danger. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she slowed the car to a crawl. Every muscle in her body was tense, ready for the confrontation that she knew was coming. As she stepped out of the car, a figure emerged from the shadows. Nathan. His face was unreadable, his posture stiff, but his eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. The man she had loved, the man who had betrayed her, stood before her now like a ghost of the past. You shouldn't have come, Nathan said, his voice low, almost regretful. I don't have a choice, Rachel shot back, her voice tight with restrained emotion. You said you had answers, Nathan. What's going on? What's the truth? Because right now, I don't even know if my son is real anymore. Nathan's eyes darkened, and for a brief moment, Rachel thought she saw a flicker of something human. Guilt, maybe? But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold indifference that she had long since come to associate with the man who had once been a part of her life. You don't understand, Rachel, he said, stepping closer, lowering his voice. This isn't just about you or your son. It's bigger than all of us. The program, Mirrored Mind, it's gone global. They've turned entire generations into operatives without their consent, without their knowledge. People like us, they've been watching us for years, training us, testing us, creating us. Eli was part of a secondary program, a test group. They've been experimenting on children for decades, raising them in simulations, feeding them false memories, shaping them into weapons. You weren't just part of their system, Rachel. You helped build it. You were one of the architects. The weight of his words crushed Rachel's chest, and for a moment, it was all she could do to keep standing. Everything she had known, everything she had worked for, had been a lie. Eli, her sweet boy, was a product of this twisted system. And she was just as much to blame as anyone else. She had been complicit. She had raised him, loved him, without ever questioning who had made him into what he was. But before she could process the enormity of what Nathan had just revealed, the world around them erupted in chaos. Tires screeched on the gravel road behind them, and within seconds, 2 black SUVs slammed to a stop, blocking their only exit. Armed men in tactical gear spilled out of the vehicles, surrounding them with guns drawn. Rachel's pulse raced as she instinctively reached for her weapon, but there was no time. They were trapped. Get down, Nathan shouted, shoving her to the ground as gunfire erupted from behind them. The bullets were close, too close. Rachel scrambled to her feet, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Nathan pulled her into the shadows of the warehouse, dragging her behind a stack of crates as the gunfire continued. They know we're here, Nathan growled, his face tense. This was a setup. We've been walking into their trap from the very beginning. They wanted you to know the truth, Rachel. They wanted you to see it all because now they're going to make you choose. The truth or your son. Rachel's heart slammed at her chest as she tried to process everything that had just unfolded. Betrayal. Lies. A conspiracy of unimaginable scope. And now, with the walls closing in around her, she was faced with an impossible decision. Keep fighting, keep digging for answers, and risk losing Eli forever, or surrender, disappear, and live with the knowledge that everything she had ever loved was built on a foundation of manipulation. The gunfire grew closer, the footsteps louder. They were running out of time. Rachel, Nathan's voice broke through her thoughts, raw and urgent. We can't outrun this. But we can fight. I can get you out of here. But you have to make a choice right now. You can't wait any longer. If you want to save Eli, if you want to destroy them, then you have to let go of everything you thought you knew. Rachel looked into his eyes, the man who had once been everything to her. He was no longer the person she had loved. He was a tool, a weapon. And now, he was asking her to trust him again, asking her to make the hardest decision of her life. Would she give in to the fear, to the pressure, and walk away to keep her son safe? Or would she take the risk, face the darkness, and fight for the truth, even if it meant losing everything? She took a deep breath and steeled herself. There was no going back now. Rachel's heart was pounding in her chest as she sprinted through the dark, abandoned warehouse, Nathan at her side, leading her deeper into the heart of the conspiracy. The echo of footsteps behind them grew louder, their pursuers closing in with each passing second. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information she had uncovered in the last few hours. Every clue had pointed to the same thing. They were everywhere. Whoever they were, the people behind this operation, the ones who had used her and her son as pawns in a game bigger than she could ever have imagined. And now, as the walls closed in, she knew she had one final chance to uncover the truth before it was lost forever. They reached a dimly lit office at the back of the warehouse, a room that looked like it had been abandoned for years. Dust covered the desks, papers scattered on the floor like forgotten memories, and yet, in the middle of it all, sat a computer terminal. A single glowing screen that flickered with life as they approached. Nathan's hand shook slightly as he typed in a code, and with a software, the screen came to life, revealing a series of encrypted files. Rachel's breath caught as she saw a name she recognized. Eli. Her son's image flashed on the screen, a child's face smiling innocently, untouched by the dark secrets that had been buried beneath the surface. But that image, her son, was surrounded by names, codes, and files she couldn't understand. It was like looking at a roadmap to a place she had never been, a map that led to everything she had feared. The program, the experiments, the lies. What is this? Rachel whispered, her voice trembling as she leaned in closer. It's everything, Nathan said, his voice hard. Everything they've been hiding. It's not just your son, Rachel. It's all of them. Every child they've taken. Every life they've manipulated. And you. Nathan paused, his gaze shifting away from her. You were never meant to be a victim. You were part of the plan. You were the architect. They made sure of that. Rachel's heart sank. The walls seemed to close in around her, the weight of the truth pressing down like a suffocating force. She had been part of this from the beginning. She had been part of the machine. Every decision, every step she had taken to protect her son, it had all been part of their plan. She had been played. Before she could respond, the door behind them slammed open with a deafening crash. Rachel spun around, her body instinctively moving into a defensive stance. A figure stepped into the room, silhouetted against the dim light. A tall man, his face obscured by a mask, but his posture unmistakable. The leader. The one who had been pulling the strings all along. You're too late, the man said, his voice cold, emotionless. The program is already in motion. Your son is just another piece in the puzzle. Nothing more. Rachel's stomach twisted as she realized who he was. This wasn't just any enemy. This was someone she had trusted, someone who had been close to her. The mask wasn't just a disguise. It was a symbol of the deception. The man in front of her was the one who had been feeding her the lies, the one who had carefully crafted every step of this twisted game. No, Nathan said, his voice low. You're lying. You can't just. You think you've been in control? The man's laugh was dark, almost mocking. You never were. Rachel, you've been chasing shadows, digging through a trail of breadcrumbs I laid out for you. And now, here we are. The final piece. The truth. It doesn't matter what you do. You'll never stop what's already in motion. Rachel's blood ran cold as she realized the extent of the manipulation. This wasn't just about her son. This was about something far bigger. The program wasn't a project. It was a weapon, a tool for control, a way to manipulate entire generations of people without their knowledge. And her son? He was just the beginning. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The messages, the threats, the secrecy. The betrayal. They had known from the start. The program had used her, shaped her, pushed her to dig into things she shouldn't have. And now, they were in full control. Her son wasn't just a victim. He was a soldier in a war she didn't even know existed. "You don't understand," Rachel said, her voice breaking through the shock. "You can't. I understand more than you ever will, Rachel," the man interrupted, stepping closer. "This is the future. You're too emotional, too human to see it. You want to protect your son, but what about the rest of the world? The ones who'll inherit the program? The ones who'll follow in his footsteps? This isn't about love. It's about power." Rachel's mind raced. There was no way out. Not physically. Not emotionally. Everything she had believed in, every single thing that had driven her to fight, to keep going, had been twisted, broken, and used against her. She was trapped in a corner with no way out. Her only choice was to give in, to let it all go and walk away, leaving her son in the hands of people who would use him like a weapon, or to fight. But even that seemed impossible. The man's eyes glinted under his mask. "It's already begun. You've already lost." Rachel looked at Nathan, who had fallen silent beside her, his hands clenched into fists. He hadn't said a word, hadn't moved to stop this final confrontation. He had been part of it all along. All of it. Every move. Every lie. Every part of the game. "I didn't want this," Nathan said quietly, his voice tinged with guilt. "But I was never given a choice. None of us were." In that moment, Rachel understood. He had been just as trapped as she had been, just as manipulated. They were both pawns in a game bigger than either of them could comprehend. And then, in an instant, everything changed. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. "This is the end, Rachel. Your son's future, your future, it's all in here. And when it's over, it's over. There's no going back." Rachel's heart stopped. She had to make a choice right now. The man stepped closer, his eyes cold, and that's when she saw it. The key. The small detail she had missed all along. A tiny tattoo on the back of his hand, half hidden by his sleeve. A symbol that she had seen before. It was the same one on the back of Nathan's neck. The same one on the files she'd uncovered. And it hit her. Nathan wasn't a pawn. He was the architect. The real mastermind behind the entire operation. He had been manipulating her from the start. The truth was far darker than she had ever imagined. The room went silent. Rachel stood there, in the dimly lit room, the weight of the flash drive heavy in her hand, the symbol on the back of Nathan's neck haunting her thoughts. She had come this far, gone through so many twists and turns, but now, standing on the precipice of the truth, she realized she was facing something much bigger than the secrets she had uncovered. The truth wasn't just about her son or the conspiracy. It was about control. It was about how far-reaching the strings of manipulation could extend, how lives were sacrificed in the pursuit of a bigger agenda, and how easily the people we trust can be part of that plan, even without fully realizing it themselves. Her heart was heavy, torn between the need to protect her son and the understanding that she had no idea what future she was fighting for anymore. The flash drive was burning a hole in her palm. She could feel the weight of everything it represented, the countless lives manipulated, the dark powers controlling everything behind the scenes. Nathan stood a few steps away, his eyes avoiding hers, guilt written all over his face. He had been the architect of it all, the one who had orchestrated the pieces of this game. But now, in the face of everything they had done, everything they had caused, was he truly a villain? Or had he, too, been a victim, ensnared in the web of deceit that had ensnared them all? Rachel closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply, trying to clear the cloud of confusion, fear, and anger clouding her mind. She thought about her son. She thought about the future. Could she expose everything and bring the truth to light, risking the fallout that would come with it? Could she protect him from a life that had already been mapped out for him? The choices seemed impossible, the path forward uncertain. Every move seemed like a sacrifice, and she wondered if there was even a way to save her son while still unraveling the conspiracy. But then, something shifted inside her. A realization, small but powerful, broke through the chaos of her thoughts. She wasn't just fighting for her son anymore. She was fighting for them, for everyone who had been manipulated, for everyone who had been told what to believe, who had been used as a pawn in a game too complicated to understand. The fight was bigger than her, bigger than any one person. It was a fight for truth, for freedom, for the ability to make choices without being controlled by the unseen forces that had shaped their lives. And as much as it hurt, as much as the realization stung, she knew that she had to be the one to expose it all. The consequences be damned. She looked at Nathan one last time, his eyes locked onto hers, waiting for the decision she would make. This wasn't just his battle, it was hers too. Together, they had been part of the machine, but now it was time to bring it all down. Slowly, with trembling hands, Rachel inserted the flash drive into the computer, watching as the files opened on the screen, revealing the final details of the conspiracy. She could feel the weight of every decision she had made, every step she had taken, pressing down on her. But this was it. The truth would come out, no matter the cost. But just as the final documents loaded, everything stopped. The screen flickered, and a chilling message appeared. "You're too late." Rachel's heart stopped for a moment. She reached for the mouse to click through, but another message popped up. "The program has already been activated. You can't undo what's already been done." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced. What did this mean? Had it already gone too far? Was there no hope for her son, for anyone anymore? The room seemed to close in around her. She heard Nathan's voice, low and distant, telling her to stop, to walk away before it was too late. But she couldn't. She wouldn't. She had come this far, and she had to see it through, no matter what. But then, a new message appeared. It wasn't from the program. It was a personal message, and Rachel's breath caught when she saw the name. Eli. Her son's face appeared on the screen, but there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't the innocent look of a child she had seen before. It was something colder, something far more calculating. Rachel froze. She knew what she had to do. She had to go to him. She had to find him before they did. But before she could react, the screen went black, and the hum of the computer stopped. The room was plunged into silence. Her pulse raced as she looked at Nathan, who had gone pale. He knew what this meant. "It's begun," Nathan whispered, his voice trembling. "There's no stopping it now." Rachel didn't wait for him to say anything more. She turned, heading for the door, her mind set on one thing: finding Eli and making sure that he wasn't lost to the machine they had all become part of. But as she reached the door, she heard a soft noise behind her. A sound that shouldn't have been there. Turning, she saw a figure standing in the doorway, someone she hadn't expected to see. Someone who had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. The figure stepped forward, the light catching their face. It was Eli. But it wasn't the Eli she knew. It was someone changed, someone different. "Mom," Eli said, his voice flat and emotionless, his eyes distant. "You're too late. I've already made my choice." And with those words, the weight of everything Rachel had fought for, everything she had tried to uncover, settled into a crushing reality. The program had already taken root, and Eli, her son, was no longer the person she had raised. He was a part of something far bigger than her, far darker. The choice she had made, the truth she had uncovered, had led to this moment. There was no turning back. As the door closed behind her, Rachel stood frozen, staring at her son, the boy who had once been her everything. The room felt colder now, the darkness swallowing the last fragments of hope she had clung to. She had fought for the truth, but in the end, it was the truth that had destroyed everything. And with one last look at the boy she had lost, Rachel realized that some mysteries, no matter how hard you try to uncover them, are better left unsolved. The truth had come at a cost, one she hadn't been prepared to pay. The consequences were far greater than she could have ever imagined, and as she walked away from that final confrontation, she knew the truth was never meant to be found. But as she stepped into the darkness, one thing became painfully clear. Some battles aren't won with the truth. Some battles are won with silence. And the world Rachel knew, her son, her life, everything, would never be the same again.